So let's start with Tip's composition. And I'm going to read you a quote. I was just next door in Ian Plant, who was doing a talk on composition, which was great, and the rules of composition and how he uses them. And I think it's really good to study the rules before you go out. But Edward Weston feels this way. Now, to consult the rules of composition before making a picture is a little like consulting the law of gravitation before going for a walk. And I subscribe to that. So I don't think about composition when I'm shooting. And the best way to learn composition is absorb yourself, immerse yourself in art. Okay? It becomes second nature to you. You know, there is no rule going on there. This is a Monet. You guys live in New York. You live in the metropolitan area. You have the opportunity to go to the Metropolitan and sit in front of some of the most amazing art in the world. And every time I come to New York, I'll be there tomorrow, sitting in front of the Impressionists and Post-Impressionists, and just soaking it in. There's a Van Gogh. Now, I'm going to share with you the masters of photography that have influenced me in my career, starting with the man himself, Ansel Adams. Born in 1902, he is the master, the original. In the beginning, God created Ansel, and it was good. But look at his hat, right? If you ever seen Nat Geo photographers, they all have great hats. Ralph, you here? He's not here. Oh, he's going to get hell later. He's got a great hat. Did you guys see him this morning? Yeah, he's got a great hat. So let's look at Ansel's pictures. This is his most famous image, Moonrise over Hernandez. And he says here, sometimes I do get to places just when God's ready to have somebody click the shutter, right? He came around the corner, he saw this, he had time enough to set up his 8x10 view camera and shoot one frame. He didn't have a light meter, he knew the luminance of the moon and went from there. This is, like I said, his most famous photograph. And when I was in college, I brought my father to New York. He brought me kicking and dragging to the museums when I was a kid. We grew up in Hastings on Hudson. And so I brought him to the Whitkin Gallery and pointed to this picture and said, $350, Dad, you gotta buy this. He didn't buy it. It sold in 2006 for $609,000. That's almost as good as owning Apple stock. So, you know, where's the Tip's composition on this? You know, your subject is in the center. Your horizon line is almost in the center, but it works great, doesn't it? I don't think he was thinking, you know, when I'm out there, I'm never thinking composition. I'm just, okay, it's here. It looks great here. Oh, it looks a little better here. And I'm going to take you through what I have gone through to get pictures, the process of it. Here's another Ansel quote. A good photograph is knowing where to stand. Isn't that the truth? And does this guy understand light? A great photograph is one that fully expresses what one feels in the deepest sense about what is being photographed. And for me, that sums up everything about where I try and go to with my photography. And this is amazing. Now, I know he didn't, I mean, I don't know the story behind this, but I bet you he waited there for hours while the clouds were moving and the light of shaft to go in the foreground and that middle ground to be in dark. And of course, I think he helped it when he printed it too. We know he did that. Ansel had a exhibit at an American place, which was Stieglitz's, Alfred Stieglitz Gallery in 1936, and that kind of launched Ansel. tunnel view in Yosemite. How many people have been here and photographed here? Oh, you guys, this is what you have to do. If you want to be landscape photographer, you have to go here. And it's really wonderful because there's a parking lot right there. This same view is there. In fact, Yosemite Valley, when you drive around Yosemite Valley, wherever there's a parking lot, you look up and you go, wow, that's an Ansel photograph there. So I always wondered what came first, the Ansel photograph or the parking lot. Anyway, so see that tree? Right, I got it here somewhere. Check out this tree right there. I went there a couple of years ago, and look, is that the same tree? I don't know, it looks pretty similar, doesn't it? Anyways, my picture's not as good as his, but I couldn't stand right where he stood. It's a little crowded there at sunrise. It's a little bit different, but it's kind of fun to go out and meet other people and compare tripods, f-stops, stuff. My tripod's better than yours. And this is the Snake River overlook. There's a parking lot here. And this is in Jackson Hole. There are the Tetons. If you go there now, it looks like this. They haven't cut the trees down. But in these days of drones, or before drones, I attached my camera to a weather balloon and tethered the weather balloon and sent it up 100 feet. And I got this shot. And then I went back in the morning and I got this shot. It's pretty sweet, but it's no Ansel Adams. Okay, then for me personally, and I encourage you to find out everything about the history of photography, because that will enrich your life so much. For me, the next step was this gentleman, Elliot Porter, who did bio research at Harvard. He had a show at the American play Stieglitz's Gallery in 1938. He was born a year before Ansel, and he was the first guy shooting color with a view camera. And to me, he was the first guy who could really see in color. Of course, this is, just when color's coming in. And he used a process called the dye transfer process, which you can't do anymore because Kodak's not here anymore. But the only control that he had with color was by making, in the dye process, you made 3 different negatives, and you could process and expose them differently to bring out the orange or the blue. Like now, today in digital, we just go, whoosh, and we've just saturated the blue, all right? So easy. He did a book called The Place No One Knew, which was, he heard that Glen Canyon, which is above the Grand Canyon, was going to be dammed up to become Lake Powell, and he went in there and photographed Glen Canyon and did a book called The Place No One Knew. I got to go back there a few years ago when there was another severe drought going on and did a story for the National Geographic magazine on Glen Canyon. So it was a real honor for me to do that. But look at how he saw. I mean, the thing about photography is seeing. It's not about the f-stops. You can go put your camera on the little green square and walk out and just see. Or use my favorite camera, the iPhone. It takes great pictures, doesn't it? The subtleties of springtime. And then for me, the next master was Ernst Haas. He's not chimping. He's shooting film. He was born in 1921. He was a medical student, but because he was Jewish and it was during the war, he was from Austria, he ended up having to give up his medical career. He came to the United States and became a photographer. And I'm very happy he did, because he, I think, wanted to make pictures not of what was there, but of how he felt. Here's a couple of quotes from him. But all of my inspirational influences came much more from the arts than from photo magazines. And I love this one. The most important lens you have is your legs. And with this particular picture, I like this quote: "A picture is the expression of an impression. If the beautiful were not in us, how would we ever recognize it?" I mean, these pictures were taken, you know, in the 40s and 50s. He could see. I have this photograph hanging in my house, and I always really loved it. To me, it was like a Zen photograph. He found this poplar leaf somewhere out on some granite, maybe in the Adirondacks. And someone was looking at my print the other day, and they said, "You know what? I think that's asphalt." He lived in New York, right? Beauty is everywhere. So, but he saw light. Look at this one shaft of light here. Well, used to work, my pointer. How about this one? Nope, but you can see the shaft of light there. There it is. Anyways, and the last gentleman who influenced me, and is actually one of a few, is David Munch. David Munch is still alive and still offering workshops. His father was a photographer, Joseph Munch. Then there's David, and he has a son named Mark. So 3 generations of photographers. I emailed Mark, asked him if he could send me some pictures of his dad that were shot with a 4x5. I love the fact that he's got a digital camera around his neck here, but he's got his 4x5 view camera on his back. And David, for me, when I was in college and just out of college, wanting to be a photographer, a landscape photographer, I found his stuff so inspirational because he used the view camera and that front tilt lens to bring everything in focus. You know, those were the days where you had to really be a craftsman, a technician, as well as have a vision. And he did very well at that. This is in Glacier National Park. I know exactly where that was taken. And I'll show you a picture that I took here at St. Mary's Lake later on. But I think this picture when I first saw it just blew me away. It's pretty similar to Ansel's composition, right? Of the rock in the foreground and the mountain in the background. And I don't know if he lit that or if the sun, probably the sun it was just a shaft of light there. And, oh, wait, who put that in? Ralph? No wonder Ralph's not here. Yeah, that's me. So I know, it's hard to recognize. I still have that hat. Kind of funny, isn't it? Yeah. So, I mean, that was my dream. You know, I just wanted to be the landscape guy shooting 8x10, 4x5, 810 out in nature. And I was actually lucky enough to get in with Life magazine. And I shot 8x10 for Life magazine out in the field in a number of different situations. There's a 4x5 and an 810. I'm shooting the Rockettes lined up in front of Radio City Music Hall. We stopped the traffic on 6th Avenue. And that was quite a shot. And then I started working, you know, and working for Life was great. And, you know, I loved the 8x10. And I never figured out if John Lowengaard, the picture editor, liked me to shoot 8x10 because the quality in the magazine was so good, or if he only had to edit 10 pictures instead of 3,000. But then I started working for Nat Geo, and the first shoot I did, which was a books division shoot, I shot 4.5, 8.10, 35, and they said, no, we're just set up for 35. So don't shoot any more large format. And that was pretty much the end of it. But I promised you successfully shooting landscapes in challenging weather. And here's my answer. Get the right clothing. That's the whole secret to challenging weather. You know, umbrellas, you know, I got them on tripods. I went by this place 3 or 4 times, stopped and photographed it. This was on a Story for Life on the Appalachian Trail. And it wasn't until I went by in the rain and photographed it in the rain that it really came together. The tree trunks were dark. The color was all saturated. So what makes up a good photograph? Okay, light, content, and composition. Okay, content, landscape photographers might call it moment, but you know, if you're a journalist, I think content is the most important thing. If you're an artist, maybe composition. But for us, landscape photographers, I think it's light. Win Bullock. How many of you guys know Win Bullock? His work? Oh, you got to check out Win Bullock's work. Amazing. Let's see where it is here. Oh, here's another Edward West. No, forget that one. The Win Bullock. I love this Win Bullock one. Here. My thinking has been deeply affected by the belief that all things are some form of radiant energy. This guy's doing mushrooms, I'm telling you. Light is perhaps the most profound truth in the universe. Wow. There's a statement by a photographer. Check out his work. So yeah, for me, it's all about light. And Ralph, who's probably at Moose Peterson's talk, likes to say, find the light and shoot what's in it. Bob, are you here? Bob Christ? Oh man, my friends. They were my friends. So I stole this from one of them, and both of them this morning at breakfast, I said, who did I steal this from? Maybe 10 years ago when I started teaching. And they both claimed it, you know. What kind of light do I work in? Or we all work in? Okay, there's 4 kinds: diffuse light, side light, backlight, and magic light. And I'm not going to go through the usual talk that I give, but I will tell you that of the pictures I'm showing you, 44 of the images are diffuse light. Half as many, 22, are backlight. 18 are side light, and I got one picture with magic light in the show. So the talk here, I'm not really showing you my best work. I can say that, right? Oh, my work is much better than what you're seeing. But I'm just going to show you these because I want you to learn what I go through. And so I'm going to take you on different assignments I've done for the magazine, the Yellow magazine. So Acadia National Park was my first assignment for National Geographic, the Yellow magazine. This was after working at the Kids magazine, and then the books division, and then I worked for Traveler for 15 years. I had a love affair with Traveler. And then I got a phone call one day from the director of photography asking me if I wanted to go to Acadia for the month of October. I found out afterwards, actually, that at least 2 other photographers had turned down the assignment to go to Acadia. And they were desperate. And they ended up calling the director of photography at Traveler, Dan Westergren, and asked him who would he recommend to do a landscape story. And I still don't know if he recommended me. Thank you, Dan. Because he thought I was the right guy, or if he was trying to get rid of me at Traveler.
Number 1.
Number 1. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I went off to Acadia. I spent the month of October there. I got to fly in a helicopter one morning, side light, and oh, it's cropped a little bit at the top. So not only are they not my best pictures, but my pictures are actually better than what you're seeing. But it's cropped a little. But then I found this, right? Just part of that big scene here. Just part of this, flying along. I saw the light backlit. It was magical. So I went from wide angle, I zoomed into about the 85 millimeter lens. So what's backlight? That's when we aim the camera at the sun in some form. And you know, we get lens flare a lot if we do that. So sometimes I'll hide the sun behind a tree or something. However, I like to work mostly in diffuse light, rainy days, cloudy days. Why? Because I can work all day long. I'm not restricted to the first hour in the morning and the last hour of the day. I've got, 18 hours that I can work, which is great. Camera's on a tripod, slow shutter speed. I love fog, diffuse light. This spot I found, I had 3 storms come through when I was in Acadia, and I saw this off the side of the road. I liked the composition, the diagonal. Not that I was thinking about composition when I shot it. But the leaves weren't quite peaking yet. So I kept going back and checking it. And when the leaves were peak, the water was not. So, it was the first frame that worked. But I'll work a thing. And then after I shot the previous one, at my feet was this shot. And I shot this, and then I moved one of the leaves to improve the composition. Completely destroyed the whole thing. Some of us can do that, Art Wolf, and some of us cannot. So he's very good at composing stuff and arranging stuff. The second time I went there, I found this. So after I get a shot, I don't just leave, I hang out. It's like, oh wow, I got the shot, I can relax, and then I look around and go, oh wow, look at that. That's kind of cool. I found this path when the leaves were green. I came back. This is the image that ran, but I came back again later. But even though the color is peaking, I don't know, maybe I should have done a longer exposure, maybe the first time it was raining, but anyways, it wasn't happening. Sometimes I just see pictures as I'm driving or walking, and I just stop and work it, and think about depth of field. Okay, I wanted to know that there were dark bark in the background, trunks, but not see too much of them. So again, the nice thing about digital, you can see it, so you can see what you're getting while you're shooting, as opposed to the old days with film, you just shot and shot and shot, different filters. I went over a bridge, I saw this, I made a mental note, it could be a shot. I came back another night, and that looked a little more interesting, but I'll work it, I'll slow down the shutter speed, get some moving clouds. It was dark enough that I didn't need to use a neutral density filter or a polarizing filter. I probably had a polarizing filter on because I usually do. I found this spot, the composition felt good to me with that leading line, and I came back when there was a storm, and that wave actually did get me, or got my camera. Canon loved it. I was shooting Canon at the time. Is there anyone from Nikon here? Oh yeah, so now I shoot with Nikon. Yeah, definitely. And I buy my equipment at B&H. And no discounts. And I do travel with Lindblad National Geographic Expedition. Anyways, enough of a commercial break. Okay, so don't ever put yourself in harm's way. You just want to make it look like what you're doing is dangerous, right? There were a couple of people the summer after I shot this who were actually swept off there's a road that goes along by the cliffs there. And I was very careful to stand in the right place so that I could get this shot and not get swept in. And my last day at Acadia, I went to this place, Otter Cliffs, and I got down there, and it was kind of overcast, but I saw this. All right, doesn't work. I saw it, if you look in the right, just above the horizon line, there is a patch of blue sky, right? There's clouds there, and then there's like an opening of blue sky. So I knew the sun was going to come up and go through that little blue section for about 5 minutes. So I set up the tripod, got my composition, and then I waited till I had my 5 minutes of light. I guess that would qualify as magic light. That's the way I define magic light. When God puts a spotlight on part of the landscape. All right, like we'll turn that one off and turn this one on. Maybe that, if I was landscape, that would be magic, but it's me, so it's not. And then my last night there, I went to Jordan Pond, and the Northern Lights happened for me. So that was a good first assignment for me. My second assignment was the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Another photographer went down there, and after 2 weeks came back and said, he didn't want to photograph it. Wasn't that nice to be able to be like that? National Geographic gives you an assignment, you go out and come back and say, no, it's not for me. So they asked me if I wanted to do it. It's like, yeah, of course I do. But can we shoot it over 4 seasons? So I went down 4 times there. Great Smokies is great. So here we are in New York. Make your first trip up to ACADIA if you haven't been there. Go down to Great Smoky Mountains. Any time of year is great down there. The fall is great. And I like to get up early. Diffuse light, fog. And when I shoot, when I shoot pictures, when the sun is up more than 10 degrees and it's hazy out, I always wonder after I look at the picture why I even bothered. Maybe I was scouting. It's side lit, but it's not even, it's only a picture worth throwing away. But maybe I was scouting, I just had to put it in there to show you. It's not my best. So here was the situation, another parking lot up on top of Klingman's Dome, and backlighting. The sun's going down, okay, but it's early, maybe 4 o'clock, but I know it's going to get better as the sun goes down and gets warmer. Now in digital, you could take the first picture and make it look like the second picture. And I attended John Paul Caponegro's talk, and we could actually make it even better now. But then I'll wait, after the sun sets. I never leave once the sun sets. In fact, a lot of times for me, it starts happening when the sun sets. You get just different colors and different feels. And conversely, in the morning, the opposite is true, maybe. You get up in the morning, you got some pink in the sky, although you're not seeing it so much on the projector. And then as the sun comes up, it changes. Okay, so the picture's over, but you don't have anywhere to run off to, right? So you might as well just hang out there and enjoy it and keep shooting and learn afterwards, how light changes. Sometimes I'll shoot, wide and then narrow and zoom in. Okay, same setting, same picture. Haven't used my feed, I've just used a zoom lens. Same thing here. I saw this, I thought it would be interesting, but unfortunately it wasn't. This compositionally is not correct. I mean, it needed something, this was broken off. Anyways, I zoomed in thinking that it would be good, but I'm using it as a learning tool. Use your feet. Okay, I saw this little waterfall, you could go underneath. I moved a little bit. I'm getting there. I'm using a long exposure, tripod long exposure. It's almost dark. I don't need a grad ND or an ND. And then this is the picture that ran. Okay, I found these gladiolas down there. It's okay, but if I had carried a spritzer with me, spritzing water, I don't do that. So I came back one day, it was raining. I was like, oh, I wonder about those gladiolas. So I came back here, and then I got that shot, which ran. So, it's a matter of just observing. It's about light, content, composition, but observing. So I was here standing in the stream, and the oak leaf on top of the water caught my eye. So I zoomed in on it, I walked over to it, and how can I make this interesting? So I just hung out with it. I just tried different stuff. I hung out there for a couple of hours. I finally came up with this. I slowed down the shutter speed and captured the shadow as the leaf is moving down the stream, getting the shadow on the bottom of the stream and blurring everything else. And then I just did some other motion stuff. That's the beautiful thing about photography. When we're in it and we're in the moment, time stands still, we're not thinking about other stuff, right? And that's why we do it. It takes us out to nature, puts us out there, and it's a lot of fun. When I see some subject that I like, I'll always work it. Sometimes I'll shoot one frame and keep going. In this case, there was that leaf there to the right. To the right of the trunk, there's that leaf out there in the middle of everything, and then there's this plant here. And so it bothered me. If I'd gone out to move the leaf, I would have left footprints because it's all dewy. If I had pulled the plants up, no, I wasn't going to pull the plants up. Anyways, I shot one frame. It ended up running as a 2-page spread. So you just never know sometimes. Don't walk past a photograph. You see something you like, take at least one picture or maybe work it. And since I got to go down there for four seasons, I found one tree that was 12 footsteps, 12 strides beyond a dead pine tree. And I thought I would shoot this over 4 seasons. So I more or less put the camera in the tripod in the same spot and shot it 4 different times and put them together like this. And then Death Valley is the largest national park in the lower 48. Yes, because we have destinations well documents. We're talking about national parks. So Death Valley is a great place to go. Okay, it's not, we don't hear about it that much as, the top 5 places to go, but as the largest national park, it offers so much. It is the lowest, 282 feet below sea level at Badwater, and it goes up to Telescope Peak, which is 11,000 feet. So I spent a month there. I went a couple of times, and I tell you, I could spend another couple of months there. So this early morning, the sun hasn't hit it yet. They have these incredible sand dunes. The sun came up. I was like really happy, and I didn't even actually see it, but once I put it on the computer, I realized there are all these footprints. Oh, well. On that peak, there's all the people have been running around there, and there's a photographer over there in the shadows. I went out there. Don't these people know who I am? So it was a little frustrating for me. So what you really want to do is to go there and wait for the wind to blow like crazy. There's 2 kinds of winds in Death Valley. There's like no wind, and then it blows like hell. That's it. And so this is what you want. You want it to blow like crazy, and then you want to be the first person out there in the morning when the sun comes up, side lit, right? And go out there, and it's like not a footprint anywhere. Oh, it was so lovely. And it's just all composition. It's all design, and it is cropped a little, quite a bit. And even when the sun gets higher, it's still photogenic, whatever. Okay, and so when I went there, before I went there, I like to see where the sun's going to rise, where it's going to set, where the moon, when's the full moon. And of course, now we have an app for that. And I saw that at Zabriskie Point, where there's a parking lot, the moon was going to set right behind Zabriskie Point. So I went there, and sure enough, there was the moon. And I photographed it in a number of different ways. I'm working it. I'm shooting it with a longer lens. I'm going wider. I'm going wider still until I see the picture I want. I went back the next day. Now, all of us know, and if you don't, you do now, that the moon rises 40 minutes later approximately every day, which is why the tides are 40 minutes later approximately every day. And so when the full moon is coming, when the sun is setting and it's a full moon, the moon rises when the sun sets. So a day or 2 before the full moon, you go out and you can see where the moon is lining up with your landscape. In fact, sometimes it is the day before is the shot. So you can see the difference between one day and the next day, okay? It's 40 minutes later setting in this particular moment situation. So I love Zabriskie Point, the parking lot there. You got this shot looking to the west. You got this shot looking to the south, and you got this shot looking to the east at sunrise. Cropped. And this backlit. I also, I worked with a writer there, and I said, so, we met. I said, so what are you going to write about at Death Valley? He goes, oh, it's all about canyons. I'm going, canyons? I haven't seen any canyons. So I found this one spot. I went there, and I experimented with a flashlight. I kind of lit it with the flashlight, and then I waited for it to get dark, and then I did a longer exposure with the flashlight. So I'm lighting the rocks. I have determined the correct exposure beforehand with my flashlight. And then another day when the wind is really blowing, I get up high. I see these beautiful sand dunes in the foreground with a nice light in the background, side lit. I work that. Then I go down on the dunes. Okay, you can see the wind blowing there. Right? So I'm making sure the wind is at my back so it doesn't sandblast my lens. And so I shot this, but the whole time I knew that I was going to end up on a hill looking into the sun because I like backlighting so much. And so here we are. Again, it's cropped at the top, but you can see the top, and there's some lens flare. You see in the lower right, there's lens flare there. So I put my hand over it, and of course my hand is in the picture, and it works better in the uncropped version. And then, so what do? I zoom in a little bit. I'm still putting my hand in front to block the light, such as like this. Oh, there you guys are. Yeah. And then I wait for the light to get the right color. Of course, now with digital, we can make it the right color. Well, this was digital. But then I still don't go home, just in case, okay? That other picture was the one that ran, but I still stay there because it's so nice. And I'm going to end Death Valley here, down at Badwater, 282 feet below sea level. Side light, I'm looking for the shot. So I'm shooting at a right angle. I turn, I look towards the sun, backlight, and I'm liking what I see because a lot of times when you have high clouds, there's a possibility the sun is going to drop underneath the clouds and it'll be clear on the horizon line and it'll light everything. It'll light the clouds up. So I'm hoping that is what's going to happen. In the meantime, I'm looking for the right composition in the foreground. I'm walking around. The light's getting better and better and better still. You can't see at the top, I'm sorry, but the sky is lit pretty well. But I still haven't found the right foreground. And so it's like peaking now, and luckily, it all came together at the last minute. I still had good light in the sky, and this foreground thing, leading your eye into the composition, worked for me. I wasn't thinking about foreground, middle ground, back. I don't think about composition when I'm shooting, okay? And the more art you study or immerse yourself in, the less you're gonna think about composition. And maybe afterwards you can go over your images and think about it. And so I stayed there once it got dark, and I took my little headlamp, and I wanted to do a star trail shot here. So I was getting an exposure test on the foreground. I put a little blue gel filter on the headlamp. I moved over. I tried different exposures, 5, 10, 15, 30-second exposures. Turns out 30-second exposure worked for the foreground. So then I opened the shutter, gave it 30 seconds in the foreground, and gave it 40 minutes in the background. Okay, so I turned off, it was completely black out there. So I turned off the light, got the foreground lit, and then my background had the star trail going. Oh, I guess I'm gonna end here at Joshua Tree. Well, I'll end when I end, whatever. So they have a Joshua Tree forest there. It's a really cool park for destinations well documents. And so I had a little windstorm going there, and I work it, and the light gets a little better. Maybe I overexpose it a little bit. It's cropped in at the top, and that was the shot. And so when you go there, when you go to Death Valley, in fact, it's worth going to Death Valley just to go to the racetrack. I mean, isn't that crazy? Here are rocks, and here's a trail that the rocks have left on this playa. And up until recently, they didn't know how it happened. And so when it's dry, it's completely dry. You can walk out there, you don't leave a footprint. And when it's wet out there, it's so wet you can't walk out there because, you sink into the mud and it sticks to your feet. And so, obviously I was there when it was dry, and no one could figure out what made the rocks move. So I took a couple of rocks home, I put them in the backyard, and I watched them. I'm kidding. But they found out recently what happens. You have to have rain and then cold weather, so you get a rime ice, and then you have to have the wind blow like crazy. And the rocks are actually moving with the ice across the top. And it creates these trails. So you need a four-wheel drive to get there, but it's worth going to Death Valley just for this. It's so surreal. And you're usually the only one out there when you get there. And so I was there. I found a pilot who was offered to fly me for next to nothing. And I encourage you to fly whenever you can. To rent a Cessna, a high-wing Cessna, is not very much money. This guy wanted to charge me $50 an hour, and I insisted on $100 because it's ridiculous, $50 an hour. But you know, you can rent an airplane. You only need an hour, sunrise and sunset. And certain places, in fact, in New York, there's a corridor you can go up and down the Hudson, and you can look at New York, you know, from the air under 1,000 feet, I think it is, between 500 and 1,000. I used to own an airplane. I used to live up in Westchester County. So that was my favorite flight, going down the Hudson around the Statue of Liberty and going back up again. But here we are in Death Valley. So I found this pilot. We're flying, you know, and it used to be an inland sea. So that's all sediment there in the foreground. You can see Badwater in the background, the white, and Telescope Peak, if it wasn't cropped. But just flying around, looking down before the sun hits it or after the sun hits it. Okay, it's that diffuse light, that shadow light. Because once the sun hit it, it just wasn't happening for me. Okay, not to say that it couldn't happen in this particular area. So I flew around. I just had so much fun with the colors that were going on there, and the minerals down on the flats. And then we flew again over over the sand dunes. Same thing, just flying around in a circle. Open up the window and fly around and shoot down. You know, backlight, side light, doesn't matter. And then if you feel comfortable, you tell the pilot to put it in a real tight turn, and you can shoot straight down. It takes a little getting used to. So look at that, it's just a little tiny airplane, you know, a camera, and a really good pilot. And I am going to end with Glacier, WATERTON-GLACIER National Park. This is another story that I proposed. I'd say half the stories you see in the magazine are proposed by photographers. And after I had done ACADIA National Park, I called up one of the photographers who turned it down to thank him for turning it down. And he told me, so now what you have to do is propose stories. And so I did, and Death Valley was one of them, and this was one as well. I'm going to end here with this one. WATERTON-GLACIER, it's International Peace Park between Montana and Alberta. Just an amazing, it's like Yellowstone with not many people comparatively, but you don't want to go anywhere in July and August, right? Don't go to Yellowstone in July, August. Yosemite, oh my God. But I went here 6 mornings in a row to this parking lot before I got the light I wanted, and it was worth it. Diffuse light, long exposure, just simple stuff. All right. Now there's that David Munch shot, almost the exact same place he shot that pictures of the rocks. When he shot it, the wind was blowing. When I shot it, the wind had made this pattern, but there was no wind. I'm just shooting down, you know, on an area maybe no more than this. And I went back there a couple of days later. The wind had blown. There was no pattern at all there. This is up on the Alberta side. There was a lightning storm going on, and it was moving towards me. So I set up the tripod. I'm trying to capture the lightning, and there was, you know, it was middle of the day, so the slowest shutter speed I had was a 1/15 of a second. So every time the lightning went, I pressed the shutter, but I missed it, you know. So I kept shooting. Meanwhile, the lightning's getting closer and closer and closer, you know. So it's like, when I finally got one, I said, that's good enough. And then when I got home, I read an outdoor photographer, they make a device that they sell at, beautiful, called a lightning trigger. And you put it, it's sensitive to the lightning. You put it on your hot shoe, you plug it into your shutter release, and every time the lightning goes, it takes the picture. I bought one, I used it once, works great. Not as thrilling though, really, as, you know. And you know, middle of the day. I don't really shoot middle of the day, but the sun, the clouds were moving across the glacier-fed lake, which had that beautiful green color. So I just stood there, you know, and watched the clouds and the light move across the glacier. Across the lake. Diffuse light, right on the edge of darkness after a storm, probably early morning. Okay, here's my one magic light shot. Well, I guess maybe the other one at ACADIA was, you know, where God has given me a spotlight on the stage. It's just one light on the stage, lighting one thing. And so, you know, what else are you going to do at sunrise? You get up, you have your coffee, you go out, and you watch what's happening with the light. And September 21st, I went back there, and it had snowed. They closed the road going up to over the pass, going to the Sun Highway. I parked the car, went up to Logan Pass, hiked around, shot all day, and it wasn't really happening for me. I came back to the car and hung out at the car, and then I saw these guys coming by, and it's like instantaneously, what do I want to do? I want to slow down the shutter speed, not too much, but I want to capture the snow falling and the rams running. And then about 20 minutes later, it really started snowing, and I got that car side. So the moral to the story is, don't go hiking. Just hang out by the car, you know, have a cocktail, cup of coffee, whatever. Diffuse light. You know, if you're going to shoot waterfalls or moving water, there's diffuse light, and then there's reflected light. Okay, this is diffuse light. That Elliot Porter shot was reflected light, where he's shooting in the shadows, but the sun is on the bank on the other side. And the beautiful thing of digital is you can see what you're getting. So the wind was blowing like crazy, and I wanted to get a shot of the aspen leaves moving, but I wanted the trunk still. So again, just by shooting different shutter speeds and looking at what I'm getting, I can choose the right shutter speed at the moment and then just continue to shoot. And I'm going to end with these two slides. This was my first day at Glacier, July 3rd. And there's a visitor center at Logan Pass. And then there's a boardwalk that goes up to Hidden Lake. And I came up the boardwalk and I saw all these glacier lilies. And where I took this picture was just a huge meadow of glacier lilies. But, you know, I know the national parks, they really protect our parks well. I didn't want to walk across this meadow. I mean, the flowers were beautiful. So I went back down to the visitor center. I went in and I asked the ranger, I said, so, you know, is that area open up there? Well, now you think about that. I mean, you're in a national park and some guy asks if the area is open, right? So they hear a lot of stupid questions every day, and this probably was the dumbest question he heard that day. And he looked at me kind of cross-eyed and he said, well, did you see any signs that said it was closed? I said, no, I didn't. He goes, well, it's open. Good. So I came up here and I came across the snow and I was very happily shooting up with a meadow of glacier lilies. And I turned around, I saw this shot and I framed it up and I shot it a number of different ways. And I went back to the hotel that night. I really liked the framing and everything, but the sky was a little dead. There wasn't a lot of character in the sky. It was side lit. So I figured I'll come back tomorrow, July 4th. So I drive back up July 4th, come up, go on the boardwalk, and don't you know it, every 10 yards was a sign. Area closed, protecting the flowers. But it was okay because that actually ran, that picture ran in the magazine, and then the Postal Service picked it up and bought it as a stamp as well. So look, I don't come cheap, 85 cents. Yeah. So with that, we have run out of time, and I thank you very much.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.